My name is David Stevens. I am a professional puppeteer. I've been doing puppets since I was a kid. It was an obsession with the Muppets that kind of became a hobby and then turned into a career kind of organically. But I'm sort of a hodgepodge of self-taught, formal training. I had a mentor for a long time too, so it was definitely a life's avocation that became a vocation. And then in my spare time, I'm also a banjo player and a songwriter. And because I do what I love, I must be happy. Like there's a lot of that correlation that you do what you love. Isn't it great to be able to do what it is that you love to do for a living? And it's like, it's a hell of a lot of work. It's a lot more work than I think people think about. Especially when it looks like so much fun. Like it looks like a lot of play. You know, you get to put a thing on your hand and give it a funny voice and make it move around. And well, isn't that great? But there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of skill that goes into it. And yeah, it is a lot of fun when you're able to have those opportunities to do it. But no, stigma is a very prominent word, I think, in a lot of areas of my life. As far as what I do and then me as a person too. When I think about it, the reason I have a solo company, it was born of necessity. Because I grew up in South Alabama, where there were no other people who were interested in this. And I was like, but I want to do it, so I did it. And I built my puppets, I created my own shows, and it was the reason Terry was such an inspiration was because he was somebody who had managed to do it by himself. Not that that was the intention, that I wanted to work alone. I just found that that's a situation I was in a lot. Because I didn't necessarily jive well with my peers. I always got along well with older people. Like old people were very special to me and still are. I always found their company to be much more... I found them to be easier to be around. I think there was a nurturing aspect to that I didn't necessarily feel with my peers always, or a little bit. But then there was also a safety issue with that as well. I just felt safe around people who were older, who knew more than I did and who could show me things and tell me stories and that kind of thing. But it was not because I tried to isolate myself. I was into something that was, if I wanted to do it, I was just going to have to do it by myself. And then it became a cost efficiency thing when I turned the professional corner. It's like, if you want people to work for you, well, they like to be paid. And I was always of the mind that I would want to pay them. Even now, I'm terrible at doing puppet costumes. A lot of these guys have costumes that were made by a guy named Scotty Rowell, who's somebody I rely on heavily when it comes to outfitting puppets, because I can't make clothes to save my life. But he can, and he's really good at it. But I won't ever ask Scotty to do something I can't pay for him to do. Because, A, it's a respect issue, and also it's because I don't like being asked to work for nothing either. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But I think I'd come back from Atlanta, or from New York. I'd had my New York experience, and I'd come back and was back in Atlanta, was sort of reestablishing myself, and still dealing with all of that baggage of feeling like I was a failure, and had gone to visit Terry, and I think Terry could tell in our phone conversations and when we would communicate with each other that I had an edge about me that was different. Because for the most part I was pretty even-keeled, and I was a pretty upbeat and positive individual for the most part. But then he definitely saw that there was something eating at me, or there was... that undercurrent was different. And like I said, Terry was on Ritalin for his depression, because he was on every drug kind of in the pharmacy for, his various health issues. And he said, why don't you try one of these? And I said, Terry's philosophy was always say maybe. Don't say no. So I said, all right. And we went to dinner. And we came back, and he said, well, how do you feel? And I said, well, what did you notice? And he said, well, you were a lot more chatty. And I said, I definitely felt a bump. So that was when I knew that it was chemical. Like there was a chemical something happening to me, that it wasn't just my circumstance. It wasn't just anything that was peripheral or directional toward me. This was a chemical reaction and a chemical imbalance in my physiology that I needed to have investigated. And so, yeah, I totally was on antidepressants for several years. I should be now. I'm not, because a lot of that family of prescription medication affects your voice. And when you're doing anywhere from 7 to 12 voices in a show on a regular basis, I can't have that be unpredictable. So we've tried several other things that just really didn't have the same effect as that family of antidepressant drugs, which I miss because it made me a more even-keeled individual. But then there's also just, I have to do this. This is my job. So you just sort of have to balance it, and figure out ways to cope. Songwriting, that's been a helpful one for me in the past. Talking to people, seeing my therapist on a regular basis. There are other things I should probably do, like exercise and diet and all that stuff, especially since I'm in my 40s now. But you don't go into puppets because you're an athlete. So yeah, those are hard behaviors to and rituals to get into. Now that I don't know, I didn't that foundation was not laid early on, so it's harder to create those habits now. But and it's not that it's not a pain to deal with, because it is. Because I know a lot of this is some of it is circumstantial, and some of it does feed that monster that's already there, and it's just the way it is. I think the awareness is the key. If you're not trying to deny it. See, for a long time I was just ignorant of it. I didn't know what it was. I just thought it was me. Or I thought it was strictly circumstances that were affecting my life. And then when you realize that it's just part of you, and it's no reflection on you. It's not personal. It's not, you're not being judged. This is not your punishment for anything you've done. This is part of your structure. This is part of what makes you you. And I think the awareness of it feeds into an understanding of how to cope with it, to deal with it, and to use it in a positive manner. And to, I don't know, I'm not big on self-medication as far as like using booze or drugs or anything like that to try and manage it. I've always been kind of really self-aware, which is why I value having a certified therapist to be able to talk to about this stuff. But there's also, I don't do any of that stuff also because of this. It's like, what a front headline. It's like, Puppeteer found an alleyway, heroin needle stuck up his arm, it's like, and there goes his career. So I'm cognizant of that too. It's like, this is not an outlet for my depression. I think I learned that a long time ago too. Like, I'm not trying to make up for a whole lot of sadness by just being happy with the work. It doesn't fill that void. That's a whole separate void. I like puppets, which is why I do puppets and puppetry and work in that world. And that's something that is its own thing, its own track. The depression is its own track. And one is not an answer to the other. I would say never be afraid to reach out to a professional who can help you, to a friend that you trust. Don't live in your head. I think that's one of the most... It's the thing I have to keep relearning, is not to live in my head. Well, once I heard the music playing, now I hear the sound. Subways are rolling underground. Well, once I saw the flowers blooming in the sun, now I see the ashes of what cannot be undone. It's a long walk home, it's a short drive away. There's a great divide where a single road was made, and I've seen the lights of Bushwick burning. Well, once I felt the warmth of love, now I feel the cold from limbs that I can no longer hold, whose lips possess a magic only mystic prophets know. Kisses hot as fire fall at my feet like snow. It's a long walk home, it's a short drive away. There's a great divide where a single road was made, and I've seen the lights of Bushwick burning. To get back that fire again. Well, once a home was filled with laughter, emptiness resides, and a silence from which I cannot hide. And the sidewalks and hallways are pathways to the stairs that lead up to the darkness that don't take me anywhere. It's a long walk home, it's a short drive away. There's a great divide where a single road was made, and I've seen the lights of Bushwick burning in a candle flame. I'd give anything to get back that fire again. It's a long walk home, it's a short drive away. There's a great divide where a single road was made, and I've seen the lights of Bushwick burning in a candle flame. I'd give anything to get back that fire again. I'd give anything to get back